the future of innovation for the Fortune 500. Our moderator is Brett Trusco. He's a professor and an author of 6 books, and he's the president and CEO of the International Association of Innovation Professionals. Welcome, Brett.
Thank you.
So tell us about your theme, sociocultural factors. What kind of society and culture is required to encourage innovation?
Well, this theme was interesting. Of the ones we've done so far, this one went in a direction that I really didn't expect. Potentially it was just because someone started in a direction, everybody else kind of jumped on the bandwagon. But what it quickly turned into was kind of a lot of people making comments about liberalism and conservatism, and kind of took it in a political direction, which I thought was very strange. The intention in the beginning was, how does society play a role in innovation? What needs to happen for society to be more innovative? What kind of education, what kind of societal support, what kind of things do we need to change? What we saw a lot of was, self-proclaimed liberals kind of taking the conservative versus liberal definition, saying, well, liberals are by definition more open to change versus conservatives more kind of rejecting change, whereas the self-proclaimed conservative types essentially stated that innovation, really needs to be systematic and controlled, and that crazy ideas are never successful innovations. But I think, like I said, the point was kind of lost as many just kind of jumped into the liberal-conservative conversation.
Well, this sounds like it's going to be interesting. I can't wait to get into it. So it sounds like the board had a lot of back and forth. Tell us about the panel.
Oh, the panel was, as usual, was amazing. We've got a lot of really bright people. Christine Haid has become my confidant. She's constantly sending me messages back and forth. But everyone is really helpful. They're a good group of people.
So in your executive summary, you talk about the challenges with innovation and large companies. So tell us what we're going to talk about today.
It's interesting because we are talking about the Fortune 500. And large companies, I think a lot of people believe, have to work harder to attract innovators because of rigidity, because of bureaucracy, et cetera, et cetera. But rightly or wrongly, they are seen as counter-innovative. But what I found interesting about this is, while people find them to be non-innovative, at least 3 or 4 of the Fortune 500 are the biggest companies in the world, and they think of them as the most innovative companies in the world, companies like Amazon and Apple. That makes that point kind of moot.
But it's interesting because those are also in the tech sector, so I wonder if the tech sector is viewed as being more innovative than some of these other, monolithic organizations.
And we will see that in the next theme.
Oh, good. I look forward to that. So continue with the summary here.
So society having a role to play in redefining expectations, conformance as societal norm is kind of has to change for us to basically create a society that encourages and helps innovation be successful. The third one, companies should make it clear they have a culture of innovation. No one really has an answer. In all the discussions we had, no one actually seemed to say, well, this is what a company needs to do to create a culture. I suppose the biggest problem with an innovation culture is the same as like the definition of pornography. Essentially, if you have an innovative culture, you know it, or if you see an innovation culture, you know it or you know it's not. But having a clear definition of what kind of culture is innovative is interesting. And the other day, I believe I was listening to National Public Radio, and they had a story on Facebook and their challenge with defining decency. They were talking specifically about the case where these women who had pictures of themselves breastfeeding were being banned from Facebook. But it went into all the different ways that this one rule turned into 80 rules, and they found out things like in drought-stricken countries that in order to keep their goats alive, they'll find a woman who's actually lactating, and they'll feed the goats on the woman. Originally, Facebook had banned those photos. So, I think it's innovation, and a culture of innovation is really in the eyes of the beholder. The fourth one, individuals and society must be prepared for a new paradigm. Companies say they want innovation, but what I tend to see out there, and what happened in kind of the conversations, is that they still expect you to come in and pay your dues. So you have to come in and show that you can conform before you can be innovative, which is a really interesting kind of it doesn't make sense. But you think about, I've got a son that's doing internships now, and he has to do the intern stuff, which is do whatever people want as quickly as possible and don't raise any. He's an intern. Nobody wants his opinions. He's not supposed to be innovative. So right. Even in an innovative culture, which is one of the companies he's doing his internships with now, you're at the bottom, you're not supposed to be innovative. So we're bringing him in, we're teaching him don't be innovative, And then sometime in the future, we're telling them, now it's time. But by now, you've probably broken their spirit, unfortunately.
Right. Sounds really, really good. I'm excited to get into this. So let's get into key point number 1. What is partnerships all about?
So, unfortunately, right now, we've got a little bit of problems with people not wanting to work with other people, things like that. But what we discover with entrepreneurs, with innovators, is that none of us really, I guess I should say, the myth of the innovator working in a garage all by himself and coming up with this great innovation is really not true in general. We need other people. And you would believe that with large companies where you've got more resources and you've got more people to help, that innovators should be attracted to those companies, that they should be saying, hey, you know what, I've got ideas, but I don't have the means to fulfill those ideas. It's kind of interesting that in partnerships, we need other people. We need to exchange ideas. We need help with our innovations. And logically speaking, that would mean I want to go to a big company where they have the resources to support my ideas and help me to innovate. Unfortunately, I think one of what we see is that we've got this kind of preconceived notion that large companies can't innovate. So unless you can somehow demonstrate, like a Google or like an Apple, that you really are dedicated to innovation, you may have the resources, you may have the determination, the drive, and purposefully be trying to innovate, GE, IBM, for example, but you really can't attract the innovators because they don't believe that you mean it.
Right. So let's get into your key point number 2 then. I don't really understand this, the power distance, uncertainty avoidance. Walk us through this.
This could have been worded a little better. I'll take the blame for that. Basically, the discussion here, power distance, uncertainty avoidance, individualism, and indulgence, that society, we don't do such a good job. We, especially in the United States, talk about individualism and that everybody can become the president of the United States, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think anybody believes it. I think, we've got this John Wayne, cowboy, Wild West mentality that we're all a bunch of people who go out and do what's right and do what we want to do. But the reality of society is that you don't get a long way being that type of a person. But from the innovation perspective, you really do need people who aren't afraid to speak up and be a little bit more individualistic. Probably one of the reasons that, innovation has broadly been successful in the United States is because we do have a lot of people that still believe that myth and are successful despite what people say. I've always said, a true innovator has to have at least 10 people tell them that their idea will never work before they can actually go out and be stubborn enough to do what everybody tells them they can't do. So that's the individualism. Power, distance, uncertainty. If we've got a CEO and you have to go through 10 people to get to the CEO to bring a great idea, you're really going to have problems with innovation. This is why we have a lot more flat organizational business structures, organizational charts, because it doesn't work from an innovation perspective. It doesn't work for communication. And then from uncertainty avoidance, when we talk about, and there's a number of organizations I've spoken with that say, yeah, management always is asking for new ideas and innovation. But at the end of the day, the only new ideas they really want is their own because they feel confident in their idea, but not someone else's. And in fact, you may be seen as a troublemaker for doing what they ask you to do.
Right. So as long as there's a power ladder, there's always going to be a fear of falling.
Exactly.
Right.
Well put. Well put.
So key point number 3, the evolution of people or culture. Is this one of the areas that caused so much divisiveness and ideology on the panel?
It was part of it. Cultures that allow failure and allow experimentation basically encourage innovation. And all over the world, when you look at global indexes, we see countries that you maybe don't even expect to be innovative that are actually quite innovative, more so than even we are. And a lot of times that is driven from, purely the culture. Other times it's driven because they finance stuff. But I find that, and I won't mention any countries, but I have a few in mind, there is a lot of investment in innovation, but they can't get out of their own way. And a big piece of that is just the society. The society has, and this is, some countries where they're wealthier and they've taken care of people. So the people really aren't hungry. The society is used to being given things. And when now being asked to be innovative, they're not really prepared for it. That cultural part of society is very important from where we come from and what we believe we can do. And the second point on this particular one, if transactional thinking is allowed to take place, and this comment came up several times, that, and I don't say this in a negative way so much as having originally been an accountant in my first life, as a chief financial officer of an organization, whenever a new idea came up, the first thing I did was calculate the return on investment. Shame on me. If it didn't make a certain return on investment, it was a bad idea. Well, a lot of innovation can't really be quantified, and if you do try to quantify it, you're going to kill it. And this is a big change we have now that I think Fortune 500 companies have to fight against, is an entrenched kind of culture of saying, well, if it doesn't make an ROI of 20%, we're not interested, go away. Whereas, there's so many other factors in driving the company, goodwill, market growth, and you may have a loss leader for a while. So this is the evolution that I think we have to see in large organizations.
That's great. So your final point is point number 4, necessity. What is this all about?
Well, this was an interesting one that popped up, and it came out of Brandon McGinty, who said, I think innovation created through unfortunate necessity in wartime. And it is something that I've personally observed as I've been out there. One of the most innovative places in the world is Israel. And I firmly believe that Israel innovates out of necessity. You're surrounded by, potential enemies who would like nothing more than to take your country down. So, you have to innovate. You have to stay ahead of whatever else is going on around you. You see this in companies too, though, in that a lot of companies don't really innovate until they get in trouble. They might talk about innovation, but they don't mean it. But once they get in trouble, they change. A really good example of this is Microsoft. Microsoft really lost its innovation edge under previous leadership, and they brought in a new leader, and now they're embracing change and they're embracing innovation. But they had to, get into some dark times. I mean, their stock didn't really go up for like 5 years. That's an indication of a company that's not doing well and was heading in the wrong direction. So, hopefully the message to a lot of large companies is that you shouldn't have to wait until it's a necessity to change.
So this was fantastic. Lots of great experts. Let's talk about these 3 that really stood out for you.
Basically, all 3 of them. You notice they're all women, which is always interesting to me.
Right.
They're in there. They're reading all of the comments. They're making really brilliant comments. Christine, as I've said, I think she's come up number 1 or 2 now for a few weeks in a row, and I really appreciate her insight. She's a really smart woman. And Famita has started to come up. She's also commenting a lot. And one of the things I find with all 3 of these folks is they're not necessarily throwing out the first idea, but they're refining the ideas. And this is that whole, when we go back to working together and contributing, these are all 3 good examples of people who are making the ideas better without necessarily being the first one to throw an idea out.
Gosh, I'm so looking forward to your next conversation. What theme are you discussing right now? You sort of teased us a little bit earlier, Brett, but tell us what's going on.
Well, this one I think is going to be, so far it is the one that is drawing the most attention from the panel. And it's a misconception to think that Silicon Valley, because it has the word silicon in it, equals innovation. What I think a lot of people don't understand, and you see this all over the world, Silicon Alley and Silicon Oasis and Silicon this and Silicon that, is that technology equals innovation. And what I think a lot of people miss is that technology is really more of an enabler of innovation. And I'll go back to saying, when we first started having cars, the car becomes a platform for other innovation. Things start getting invented off that platform. So you don't need tire manufacturers if you don't have cars to put tires on, and you don't need GPS in a car. It enables other things. And from the technology perspective, so much of innovation is being driven off of that platform called the internet that's now been around for 30 years or so. But you look around, you can find other platforms that drive innovation, new things that people invent. It's becoming a very popular topic quickly. I'm having a hard time keeping up with all the comments, but we'll keep up.
Good. I really look forward to that conversation. This is really fascinating to walk through what we went through today with the preface of kind of how the panel sort of went in so many different directions. So thanks for sharing this, Brett.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That is Brett Trusco. He's a professor and an author of 6 books. He's also the president and CEO of the International Association of Innovation Professionals. And Brett, we will talk again.
Yes. Thank you.